I was playing a game the other week and a dispute arose about which infantry team in a platoon was the unit leader. None of the unit's bases were marked and it wasn't possible to tell, even for the owner of the force. I individually mark all my infantry bases, but technically it's sufficient to indicate unit leaders and to identify what teams are in what platoon. Knowing which base is the unit leader is important for a few reasons. Firstly, unit leaders can spot for artillery, so it's important to know which team this is when determining line of sight and so on. Secondly, you need to know which base is the leader for determining command distance. In Flames of War version 4 and Team Yankee, to be in command, teams need to be within 6 inches of the unit leader, 8 inches for larger platoons. If you get the unit set up wrong, this can be important because only teams that are in command count towards the total for determining if a unit is in good spirits. If the unit leader is up one end, other teams in the platoon might be out of command and the unit might technically not be in good spirits, even if there are 3 or more surviving teams. This situation can also arise in Team Yankee using the line abreast command rule if the unit leader is at one end and more than 16 inches from other surviving teams. I want to have a look at how you can indicate the unit leader for different teams. One common technique for armoured tank teams is to model the unit leader with a commander figure and an open hatch. I'm using this technique for this unit of Shermans. It's immediately obvious which tank is the unit leader here. You can also use stowage or unit number decals or other markings to indicate the vehicle teams. For example, with these BMPs I'm using both the commander figure and unit number decal techniques together. Infantry bases can be a bit more tricky. One approach you can use is placing bits of terrain, rocks, tree stumps or other visual cues on the base to indicate the leader. However, I use actual markings painted onto the base itself. I started out fairly low-key with a small coloured panel indicating the platoon and different marks, usually dots, stripes and crosses, to indicate the unit leader and individual units in the platoon. You can see this here on my British World War II infantry. This worked okay, but it was a bit complex and the markings were a bit subtle. I have now moved on to a more obvious and simpler marking technique. These Russian motorised infantry troops for Team Yankee are using my current markings technique. I use a primary colour to paint the edges of the base all around. This really helps you and your opponent immediately spot which teams are in what platoon, even when there are a lot of units in one area. I've been worried that this technique might be too intrusive, but I think it looks fine on the tabletop. Then I use markings in a contrasting colour to identify individual teams in the platoon, including the unit leader. You can use whatever system of markings makes sense to you, but I'm using a number of dots and bars to indicate the individual teams. So in this Russian platoon, the platoon colour is blue. All the blue-edged bases belong to this platoon. The unit leader and the AK-74 rifle teams have yellow dots, and the RPG-7 teams have yellow bars. The number of dots and bars identify the individual team in the platoon structure. Again, it's only really necessary to identify the unit leader. Indicating the other teams is not strictly necessary for the game, but I like to keep them organised. I've used this system for a couple of years now and it works okay for me. One drawback is the markings lock you into a particular platoon structure. This means if you modify your list, your markings might not work anymore. For example, my Soviet motor rifle list has 2 minimum strength infantry platoons. I thought the 2 infantry platoons might be more flexible. However, play experience has indicated a single larger motor rifle platoon might stand up to losses better. I also have had the issue of running out of primary colours for different platoons. Once you have a red, green, blue and yellow unit, it starts getting a bit harder. That's why these Australian Red-Eye teams for Team Yankee have Genestealer purple base colours. It looks a bit odd, but I've gotten used to them. Anyway, that's my system. It has evolved over time and it makes sense to me, and in its current form it also means my platoons are obvious to my opponents. Unit leaders are easy to track. Maybe marking the individual teams is a bit unnecessary, but you should adopt a system that makes sense to you. I hope this inspires you to have a go at marking your own units. Do you have a different system that works for you? Let us know in the comments.